Well, welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. Today, we're going to talk about chainsaws again, but we're going to talk about how I became a sort of chainsaw collector. For most of my working life, I worked in an automotive shop, but it was also a shop where we'd work on just about anything that had a gas engine on it. General repair shop. And so, as people would bring things in, like if they brought in a chainsaw to get worked on, or tiller or something like that, they would talk about what they wanted done and stuff. But in the waiting room of the area, the shop there, we had extra room and stuff, and so if I had an old piece of junk, I'd just throw it out there and people could see it. So if somebody came in with a saw and I'd fix it up for them and they were happy with it and stuff, they said, hey, I think we've got my dad's old chainsaw laying under the bench there, something wrong with it, would you like it? So people started to just give me stuff. That's a very long time ago, before people were collecting this stuff. And so the largest portion of my chainsaw collection was stuff that people just wanted to get rid of. And of course I willingly accepted, since I'm a big time junk collector. But anyway, this saw here is kind of an interesting story. There was these two old guys that operated a logging museum at about 100 miles away. They'd drop in if they were in town just to see what new piece of junk I had, and they knew I had interest in the history of stuff and logging stuff. So they were always talking about their newest acquisition. Well, they came in one day and they were just as thrilled as could be. They just found this. And I told them a little bit about the history on it and gave them a little information on it and stuff. They weren't even aware that it was made in Seattle. And, it was an area that was really rare to be making chainsaws. Most of them were made back east or in California. But anyway, they thought this was the greatest thing in the world and stuff. And so the museum they had was fairly small, but they had a really nice selection of stuff. And these two guys didn't ever work in the woods, but they were just true enthusiasts, man. They just loved logging history and stuff. And so they built this really nice display as you came right into the front door, and they had some pieces of wood there and some other equipment, and they had this saw laying there. And the reaction to it was unexpected, because that was a logging area and stuff, had been for a long time, and the old time loggers come in and ranting and raving about how they hated these old saws because they were so hard to start and keep running and everything else. They always forgot that they could produce a lot more lumber than they could with a handsaw, but they didn't have a lot of happy memories of them. And so anyway, they came down one day and talking to me and stuff, and they said, well, nobody really likes that chainsaw. Maybe we should give it to you. And I just thought they were kidding. So they went out to the truck and brought it in and dumped it off, and here it is. So I've had this for many, many years. The engine was froze up when I got it, and using my magic elixir, I've got it unstuck. It's got really good compression and stuff. And this is what's called a Titan Model 200 or Junior. These came out in 1948. And the company itself made chainsaws from 1941 on until the mid-50s, and when they sold out. But the company was Mine and Mill Company, and they made logging and mining equipment stuff, and they got into making chainsaws. And most of the equipment they made was sand cast, and all the castings on this are sand cast, so they're semi-rough and stuff like that. They're super strong, but they're a little heavy. And compared to McCulloch of the same year, and McCulloch had die castings and stuff, it really was a lot nicer made and stuff. But these were one of the leaders in the chainsaw industry in the early years, and were a big seller, and they made virtually every part of this saw except for the ignition system and the carburetor and bearings. But they made their own chain. Everything on the carburetor was another thing they didn't make, but everything else is made in-house. And you can see this huge spike on it here. You could get up to a 44-inch bar with this, and the first model in 1948 came out, was underpowered and overheated, and so it wasn't very popular. Kind of give them a black eye right out of the gate. But they re-engineered it. They had a good engineer and stuff, and hopped it up and cured the problems and stuff. And they had a good chunk of the early chainsaw market for the commercial loggers and stuff. And then later on they got into the homeowner saws, and then they just got out of the saw business altogether. So some of the features of this saw, it's a 74cc, and It's got this nice hand grip here. The later model ones had a rubber grip on it. There's no anti-vibe or any of that stuff. They didn't have any of that stuff at all. Carburetor here is a float carburetor, so it can't be run on its side or anything like that. And the throttle is right here. And it doesn't have a choke on it, so when you went to start it, you just put your thumb over it and pulled it through. You can see this thing's got really good compression. And fuel tank and oil tank are up here. Manual oiling only. It's a gear drive. If you wanted to cut a tree, you wanted to cut it sideways, there's a lever here that you release right here. And then you can rotate the bar. It's a little stiff here. You can see that it turns, it's just real stiff. Something we're going to work on, but I'm going to just lock it into place again. But like I say, it was an interesting piece. And chainsaw oils, back when these were made, they didn't really have specific oils. They just used motor oil. Ran on a mix of 8-to-1, it's just like syrup. Smoked like a banshee, killed a lot of carbon, so the guy had to really maintain them. Plugs would fail all the time and stuff. And then these great big chains. This is a 9/16 chain. It took them a long time to figure out that a smaller chain has less friction and cuts better. This is one little interesting piece here. We can zoom in on it. These guys, like I say, didn't really know much about logging stuff, and the chain's on backwards. So nobody caught that before except for me. Anyway, it weighs 30 pounds with a 16-inch bar. With this bar on it and stuff, it weighs about 42 pounds. And you could run up to a 44-inch bar on them. So anyway, that's how I got into collecting stuff and other motor-related things, kind of the same way. A lot of these things, I started collecting stuff when it wasn't collectible, but I just liked it. I liked the challenge of getting it to run and stuff like that. And being a mechanic by trade and stuff, I had the skills and the tools and the knowledge. And then I always followed up with history. History to me is almost as important as a piece of junk. It's interesting to see how the things changed over the years and the market changed and stuff like that. It really gives you a better idea of what was going on in the country than a history book does today, because they don't really teach history. But anyway, there you go. Another Vintage Chainsaw BS video. We'll see you on the next video. Vintage is best.